Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Theo Thrui. I'm one of the writers and co-creators of the Holmwood Foundation, and I'm joined by the wonderful Georgia, who is my co-creator. And we've got our guest, the wonderful Chris McAuley, today. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, so we're going to be chatting all things Dracula today, and I'm going to pass over to Georgia with the first question, so you can introduce Chris.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited for you to be our first guest in this little podcast series that we're doing about people who work within the sphere of the Dracula world and kind of their interpretations of the original novel. So for people who may not know you and your body of work, please introduce yourself and what you do.
I'm Chris. I'm currently in the basement. My wife's quilting equipment is behind me, and I am the co-creator and writer of the Stokerverse, along with Bram Stoker's great grandnephew, Decker Stoker. The Stokerverse is a franchise that spans novels, comic books, audios, tabletop games, upcoming video game, and all sorts of things, including beers.
Including, we saw your wine bottle that you showed us.
Yeah, this is technically known as a growler in Canada.
It's
So this is
amazing.
I don't know how much this holds, but it was a couple of it was a couple of pints in that. So it's not typically sold in this. It's sold in a more elegant bottle. It's this was one of our ranges called Long Tooth Red, and it is 5 point. This one's 5.6%. And so not very heavy beer. But we also have sour beers, which I didn't know what those were. And last year we launched a sour beer, which is quite popular in certain pizza establishments because apparently it goes well with cheese. I don't like cheese, and the sour beer was a bit of an acquired taste, but it was very popular. So yeah, fair play, the brewers.
Very cool. So yeah, just trying to imagine this, like, yes, this Dracula themed sour beer with cheese is just go for
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it's extremely. It was very popular. It did quite well, and I'll be honest. I suppose I'm always honest about things. At the actual press conference, the beer I was drinking was not sour beer. I'm probably allowed to say that, like 'cause it's a year on. It was about a year on. I was drinking something else. No, I actually have I have strange allergies. So Decker usually brings this up very quickly that I'm allergic to garlic, that I can't wear silver. I'm Irish. I work at night. There's a whole list that very strange coincidences, but I have a very I would say I have a very weak stomach in some ways. I can't take anything that's too acidic, and sour beers are very acidic. I have tried it, and my wife again, she loved it. She enjoyed the sour beer, so fair enough. Just wasn't for me.
Fair enough.
So a wide array of things that you've made within the Dracula universe, including, as we now know, beers and wines.
Beers and wines, yeah.
So how did you first encounter Dracula as a character, and in what medium, and what drew you to it specifically?
Well, in my primary school, in Ballymena Primary, I think I was about 7 years old, and we had a little library at the back of our classroom, and everybody was like reading Hardy Boys and all the rest of it. And some twisted person had put Bram Stoker's Dracula in there. And to be fair to my mother, like she would go and get me a book a week. So she would go to, like, I think it was a bookstore called Bargain Books, and you could get a classic book for like £1. You know, we were the typical sort of poor working class Irish family, and God bless my mother. She would make sure that I was nourished with literature. But I lifted Dracula off. Did I really understand it all? Probably not. But I was fascinated with this, with what I did understand of it. And I mean, I came from the era of like Count Dracula and all of that sort of
Mm.
stuff. So we had the understanding of vampires was more from a cartoonish aspect, and I'm introduced to Dracula, and I found the character of I remember finding the character of Van Helsing fascinating as a kid, and then I read the book. Um, I think I started watching some of probably the Hammer films. Carry On Screaming. Actually, I remember
Oh
that.
yeah, that's a great one.
Right, Frying Tonight. But probably from those sort of homages, and then I didn't really think much about Dracula for a while, and it was really just whenever Decker contacted me after reading a vampire themed comic that I had written about starting to write comics within Bram Stoker, for the Stoker estate and stuff, that I started examining Dracula properly. But up to that point, it was mostly the pop culture Dracula. Um, you know, so yeah, that was sort of the introduction. Was at primary school.
Mm. I remember we also had a copy of Dracula at school, but it was the picture of the photograph of the wolf that then became like a meme picture online,
Right.
which I don't think was intended by whoever had set this book out. So my very first introduction to Dracula was the wolf meme as a front cover, which
Well,
is
I went back to that. So I have a library named after me in that school now, and I went back to my old grammar school, Ballymena Academy, and I found out when I was lecturing there, I found out that they now study Dracula for GCSE.
ah.
That's
Oh yeah,
cool.
So
we also studied Dracula. Yeah.
I found that interesting because I didn't do that for GCSE English,
I didn't
but
either. That's
no.
annoying. I'd have loved it.
Uh, well, I upset all the teachers because whenever I was delivering the lecture, I'd come on. I was dressed in the attire of I didn't quite go the top hat, but the black and white stuff, right? And I was, the kids were all sitting there just going, "Ooh." And I said, "Well, do you know all about Dracula, kids? No, it's all about sex, sex, and drugs, and violence. You think it's all about a creepy old man running around a graveyard? It's not." And they're all like, "Oh, whoa." And the teacher's going, "Oh my God, what have we done?"
That's how you get kids to read.
Yeah.
And it
Kids
was,
don't know what to read about.
I gave them like the whole 9 yards. I went through, why they should be proud of the Irish heritage, Dracula, everything, the whole 9 yards about it. And kids stayed behind and they asked me, and it was, it was really, it was interesting because they hadn't heard really that the story of Dracula. They didn't understand what they were reading. So and it's very, very difficult text to read. It's impenetrable, really. Whenever you read it back now, it's very much of its time, and that's why I always approve of modernizing things, and then going back to the original or trying to point back to the original. But there has to be some sort of relatable context to get kids into classic literature. So, I was happy enough that the Stokerverse did that. I mean, they read they actually took the comic books and read, and I was like, look, this is what we believe how Bram was going to bring Dracula back, because he did want to do another Dracula, because it was a cash guy.
Mm.
And, he left, he left his wife basically with Dracula's guest and said, whenever I pass on, there you go. That's basically your pension. But yeah, everything kind of came full circle this year with having the library in the school, the library that I got and then all of that. So it was a bit strange, I suppose.
That's cool. Yeah, it's yeah. It's like thinking like how impactful something like picking up a book in your primary school can be. Because like I remember, I think it's The Thief of Always by Clive Barker was one that I picked up at primary school, which I think is designed for young children, but probably not as young as I was reading them. Like it was,
And
I
it's
think
Clive Barker. If he's going to
it was
write a
Clive
kid's
Barker.
book, it's going to be.
And I think it was like one of the first like books I remember reading cover to cover and did want to put back in the school library. So like, you know, those books are so informative to us as kids. Yeah, crazy. I still love that book. I need a copy of that book. So I have my second question for you. So off the back of that, do you have a favorite Dracula interpretation that isn't like yours? Like if you were to not look at the Stokerverse, is there one that you particularly enjoy or even not enjoy as much? Like
I like Dracula Dead and Loving It. I actually really enjoyed that. I thought that was quite funny, and it's quite close to the book as well. There's parts of it that are quite well. It's more. I suppose it's more close. It's closer to Bela Lugosi's, Universal kind of. It's kind of a homage to that. But yeah, I enjoy a lot of it. I mean, my favorite is actually, strangely, the Dracula from the Monster Squad. I really enjoyed Monster Squad as a kid because I went to hospital to get my tonsils out, and that was the movie that they had on VHS. And I remember watching that with all the other kids that were all sickly, and they put that on. It was like, okay, wow, monsters, right? And that Dracula was quite sinister. He was quite a sinister Dracula for a Dracula like that. I liked the Dracula in Van Helsing, in the Hugh Jackman. I thought it was a fun film. I think it's important to sort of embrace the fun nature of Dracula as well. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of the Ford Coppola film. I mean, the lines like, I have waited an eternity. No,
Yeah.
come on. And that didn't work for me. I did like Bela Lugosi's quite refined Dracula, and I liked Christopher Lee's animalistic Dracula. Really enjoyed that. And Udo Kier. I recently watched Udo Kier's interpretation, which is very queer. That otherness, he taps into that otherness, which is really part of vampirism and vampire lore. The worst Dracula is Blade 3.
I have not seen Blade 3, but now
You're very lucky. You're very lucky.
I love seeing bad. I love seeing bad Dracula based.
It was so Dracula's like this. He looks like a wrestler.
Interesting.
He's just like this muscular guy,
Jack Dracula. Okay.
Jack Dracula. So he's not elegant in any way, shape, or form. In fact, there's none of the dialogue in the entire film is elegant. And I liked the first two Blade films. I thought they were pretty good. I enjoy that action. I enjoy the action movie slant, as well. I like that sort of stuff. So, but all time, I suppose if we went for an all-time favorite, it would probably be Christopher Lee in his first Dracula film, and I like Scars of Dracula because Patrick Troughton's in it.
Yes.
That's Clove.
I think I watched that one not long ago. Because funny enough, I think I was watching Sinners at my dad's house, and I ended watching Sinners, which was fantastic. And I think Sky then recommended the next film that was on, and it was Scars of Dracula. So I watched that. Yeah.
It's Clove's an interesting character in Hammer lore because Clove, as a servant, he's played by a couple of people, and sometimes he's quite sympathetic to the victims because he himself is a victim, and sometimes he's more sadistic with Dracula. But yeah, Hammer did a great job, I think, with Dracula and Peter Cushing as Frankenstein. And when you look back on it, it's very schlocky, but it's just enjoyable.
It's got a certain feel to it, like a
yeah, like the blood's paint. I mean, that's essentially what that's essentially what the taste is. Every time you see blood, it's just paint.
It's so clear.
Dulux. Yeah, it's Dulux everywhere.
We watched the one, I always forget the name, even though it's my favorite Dracula, I always forget the name of it. It's the one set in the 1970s.
1972 AD, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's my favorite. We watched it.
Dracula goes disco dancing and all of that stuff. Yeah.
There's also a Jeremy in that one.
No, that was where we got Jeremy's original surname from, and then Jeremy is from Taste the Blood of Dracula. There's a Jeremy Sacker, and that's where we got him from.
Ah, yes. I knew there was a Jeremy in one of those,
Mm.
so that's where you stole the name from. That's very fun.
Yep.
Well, because we've all grown up with these versions, like I mentioned Count Dracula, but for the American folks watching this, it'll be Count Von Count from Sesame Street, right? There's always been these characters of vampires, whether it's the image of Dracula turned on its head or whatever, and I find that interesting because in pop culture you just can't get away from Dracula.
Yeah. And it's a very particular image of Dracula as well. It's not necessarily the Dracula from the book. It's the Dracula from mostly the Universal. So you've got, the widow's peak, the black hair, the red cape, sort of none of which was originally there, but he's a myth that's kind of grown interwoven with every media adaptation of him, which I always find really interesting. In Holmwood, we tried to bring him right back to the book version of him and then make him more eldritch, because that's how we like to portray him. But it's always interesting how he's been reinterpreted over the years by different people and keeps being reinterpreted. We never seem to get bored of it.
That's cool. Speaking of the book, do you have a favorite character from the book? Maybe Dracula himself or one of the other characters? Or someone you enjoy writing, even?
When you read the book, if you've any moral conscience, you couldn't love Dracula.
Yeah,
he's just a complete narcissist and abuser. I think I like Jonathan Harker, and there's a reason for this. Harker's always been seen as a bit of a cuck. He's always been put as this cuck figure, right? And I think he's anything but. If any of us were put in a situation that we were in a castle of a supernatural psychopath, I think most of our sanities would just disappear, especially if you're seeing letters where you know that you're going to die. You see this guy dressed as you going out and put and then you have the encounter with the weird sisters, and then you see a baby basically getting pulled apart in front of you like a piece of KFC chicken. Because that's what happens. This is all sanitized in the films. But that baby's pulled apart and then the mother's ripped to pieces outside the castle. And all of this is going on. And then he still finds it within him to climb down castle wall, smack Dracula with a shovel.
Yeah.
And get out. Now, the interesting thing is that there's a blank in the book, because you don't know how he gets out. Now, we know, Decker and I know how he gets out. So we've put that in the upcoming video game. That's actually the first you play the prologue and you get out. And it's the way that Bram intended Harker to leave. And it's all linked to the fact that Dracula is not the devil. It's always meant to be, because Dracula's original name was Count Mandeville. And that in itself is fascinating. But yeah, I love the other reason I like Harker is because he's a man of moral conscience. Like he worries a lot about, was he faithful to Mina? Was he not? What happened in that bed? What was going on there? And then whenever Dracula, there's nothing erotic about the scene when Dracula's with Mina.
Oh no, it's an assault.
When I wrote Voices of Dracula and Jessica Martin did the Mina part, she read the script and rang me up and she was like, this is really what happened. And I said, yeah, Dracula comes into the room, takes his long dirt encrusted fingernail, cuts open his chest, blood and pus are running out, and he takes her mouth and slams it up against. She's covered in blood and pus. He's a corpse, an absolute corpse. And then the band of heroes break in. He leers at Harker, shows Harker her face, and flings her across the room as if to say, do you want her now? And what Jonathan does straight away is he runs to his wife. And it depicts that love is stronger than evil. And I think that's why he's one of my favorite characters. and I've tried to redeem him a little bit, a little bit, in the Stokerverse, a little bit more than what the films portray. But yeah, so there you go. There's my answer. That was a
It's a
bit
good
long-winded.
answer.
We
That's my
absolutely
answer.
agree. We love the Harkers, and we love Jonathan and Mina. And I think he's had a bit of a renaissance recently in kind of the Dracula fandom spaces. He's being known as sort of a white-haired anime boy.
Right.
uh, there's been a lot of him, attacking Dracula. His decision internally that if Mina becomes a vampire, one, he's not going to let anyone kill her. Two, he's going to become a vampire himself, so she's not left alone. And just the solidness, the completeness of their love throughout the book, regardless of what either goes through. I think a lot of people have started to pick up on that away from the Dracula romance that has been exaggerated in other media. So we're always very happy when someone says their favorite character is one of the Harkers.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's something nice. There's something about Renfield as well. I mean, there's something about Renfield that whenever he looks at Mina and he says, for God's sake, get away from here. I have him as a character, and the way I portrayed him in the Stokerverse is that he's somebody who grew up in a very Catholic home, and that he likes wine and women and gambling, and he was the senior partner of the Hawkins law firm, and was sent out before Jonathan was sent out. He was sent out to Dracula, and before that, his father is really angry at him. It's like, you're a wastrel, you're this, you're that, and he goes down. I have him come down to the 10 Bells and drinking and never touching women, but wanting to. And then when he goes to Castle Dracula, Dracula feeds him, force feeds him maggots. And then he runs, and he's in a state of undress with the running, and then he bursts into the room with the three weird sisters. And, they proceed to sort of, seduce him, and he looks up and he sees Dracula smiling. So he's now in Dracula. He has a god that says yes, and a father figure who affirms all his desires. So that's how I've sort of crafted Renfield a little bit. And, it makes absolute sense, because essentially Dracula becomes this cult leader for him. So maybe Renfield a little bit in some ways, because I like the fact he gets redeemed at the end. He knows that he's going to be ripped apart by Dracula, but he warns them anyway. So that's quite noble.
I think there's a lot about Renfield, because there are so many gaps in the final text that need to be filled regarding his character, his backstory, why he is where he is. So it's so interesting to see how people fill those particular gaps to make him a fuller character, because we really only hear about him from the perspective of Seward, who sees him as an object, as something to be studied, when he's a whole man. He's there for a reason. He's had a life, and he has a connection to Dracula that we don't see where from. So really, really cool that you've made something for him.
Very cool. Do you have a favorite scene in the book? Obviously, you can talk about each scenes in depth, because I know, obviously, if you love Jonathan Harker, I guess the scene you mentioned is probably a great scene. But have you got a favorite scene?
There's an interesting scene where there's a couple of interesting things to do with Van Helsing. He's basically the magician of the whole thing, right? And I think when he bursts out into laughter, trying a very grim, and I have him as, in the Stokerverse, I see him as a bit of a pugilist. His face is as a boxer's face. I think he's rather than that sort of old white-haired professor that you see through the Universal characters. I think he's a hard, tough bastard. I think he's seen a lot of shit, and I think he's been involved in a lot of shit. And when Clint did his face for the RPG, he's got the broken nose, he's got the pudgy face, and I can see him bursting out into laughter. And it's almost like not a form of madness, but it's a form of release. And that's what he says when King Laugh comes. Like, I mean, it's a form of release from all of this darkness that he dwells in and his friends dwell in. Now, Dracula, it's interesting why Dracula does what he does. So he targets Lucy because he knows Lucy's connection to Dr. Seward, and he knows Seward's connection to Van Helsing. And when Van Helsing's called, Dracula is playing the game. This is the start of the chess game between Van Helsing and Dracula. And Dracula knows that Van Helsing's hubris. He will say, I can save this woman. But he won't be able to. Now, when Lucy becomes a vampire, Dracula also knows that Van Helsing's only recourse is to say to the three men that loved her, okay, we have to destroy her body. We've got to cut her head off, we've got to destroy the body. We've got to, first of all, this woman you've loved, she's become an undead monster who's attacking children. And now you have to do these horrible things to the body. And what Dracula thinks is going to happen is that the band of heroes are just going to walk away from Van Helsing and say he's crazy, and then Van Helsing's going to be left on his own, and then Dracula wins. Of course, the opposite happens. And I find all of this fascinating, that chess game that Van Helsing plays with Dracula. And the one scene I like in Coppola's Dracula is at the end, where Van Helsing says, "Gentlemen, we have all become gods, madmen." And there's that form, and I love Hopkins in the role, and that's why I think that's why I saw him as a pugilist, because you see Hopkins as that, rugby scrum half figure, and I wrote not within the Stokerverse because I write Dracula for other magazines and things as well. And there was one story I wrote, which was a younger Van Helsing. And basically what happened was Van Helsing's wife gets sent to a sanatorium. And essentially that's the start of the whole Dracula thing. And the wife becomes a vampire, and Van Helsing's an alcoholic. He's driven to drink, and he sees his wife. He comes out of the pub and he sees his wife, and he's like, what the fuck? Holy shit, what's this? And then he walks towards her, and she's being very seductive and all the rest of it. He knows there's something wrong. And then she bears the fangs, and he's like, Jesus. And he pushes her away. And, and he goes to a professor who's skilled in these matters. And, Van Helsing at this point is a rationalist, but he's also losing his mind. And then he's explained that there's vampires, and then he has to go and kill his wife, and then he finds out that there's Dracula, this ancient evil that's caused this misery, this disease of the blood and this misery. And I would like to think if Van Helsing had met Dracula and Van Helsing had been younger, Van Helsing would have gone to try and beat the shit out of Dracula with his bare hands. And I like that idea that there's a madness and an anger in Van Helsing that is quite pure and quite human, because Dracula, there's nothing really human there. It's a mockery of humanity, and I see Van Helsing as somebody who, I think he's that counterpoint. He's the very human, almost version of that sort of the flip side of the coin almost. Those are some of the scenes that I like with Van Helsing in the book. He's a bit of a MacGuffin at times, though, which is a bit of a problem. Well, I'll hypnotize you, and then we'll know where Dracula is.
Yes. Like, how do you know that, man? Yeah.
It's like, okay. Well, you see, this is why then I sort of looked in the created a backstory for him, that he must have known something, that there's been this level of, this disease of the blood that he's been fascinated with, and and that sort of I can't remember what anthology I wrote that in, but it's somewhere out there, and it's part of it for me.
Cool. Yeah, it's always so fascinating to hear people's different interpretations, because I would never have considered that for Van Helsing, but I can also get my head I'm like, no, okay, I can see it. I can see, like, it's like seeing where people come from. It's like we totally agree with Jonathan Harker. But I know loads of people who just can take him or leave him. They're more interested in Quincy, or they're more interested in Lucy or Mina. And it's like, it's just so interesting, like the characters that we are drawn to, and that kind of individual interpretation is really fascinating.
Well, Dracula would never have survived as just a book. I mean, the reason it was popular was because it became other things, and it was allowed to become other things. And I try and be as authentic as I possibly can, but with the best will in the world. I've had to inject some levels of originality into the Stokerverse. I mean, the example is The Virgin's Embrace, which was our first comic book, and Jessica Martin illustrated that. And it was originally entitled, and I apologize if this offends people, but it was originally entitled Squall. And of course, I changed it to The Virgin's Embrace and updated it. And there had to be a level of that. There has to be a level of originality put into the things to keep it alive, to keep it moving on. I mean, the Virgin's Embrace, it contains the original story. It contains then, I think it was a 40, 50 page graphic novel. And then the Stoker family gave us, was it 30 pages of content from their archives. And it was basically a treasury. And that was what we started the Stokerverse with. It wasn't Dracula. And we've done stuff with Stoker's other work, like Jewel of Seven Stars. So we've gone into the Lovecraftian stuff, and we've linked that to Carfax Abbey, and what Dracula really wants in Carfax Abbey, and we've done things that are original but try and tie in to a Bram Stoker universe. Because if you just look at the book and you just recycle the book over and over and over again, it loses itself in that iteration, and it doesn't survive. So I think really it was Bela Lugosi that kept Dracula alive, because women found him extremely attractive at the cinema, and they were going to the cinema in droves to see this. And Christopher Lee probably had that level of magnetism, and that form of, and I think there was a form of sexuality injected into the Hollywood Dracula that basically kept it going and made it more palatable. So it's all it's all things to all people, really.
Very cool. Right. So, I guess we can now move on to talking about the Stokerverse, because there is so much in the Stokerverse. Let's. I won't say start from the beginning. What is a project you're currently working on, or recently worked on, that you would like to tell us about? I know we've got the Dark Reign game, but we've also got the comics. What would you like to share first?
We've got something called Shadows of the Stokerverse, and it's a fully illustrated, hardbacked book novel that has. So Stokerverse doesn't just focus on Dracula. We've got other characters in there. So we've got like an interpretation of Frankenstein's monster, an interpretation of Jekyll and Hyde, an interpretation of all the sort of Victorian myths, even Miss Havisham, we've turned into a zombie. We've got all these kind of interpretations there that are fun. And we've got, within Shadows of Stokerverse, we've got Aleister Crowley, we've got A. Witt, we've got all the people that Bram Stoker was involved with. I'm a Freemason, and Bram Stoker's a Freemason, and there's an awful lot of the occult that's sitting in there, especially during Victorian London, where people were obsessed with this, and this Egyptology stuff that was really coming in. And that's what the stories are all about, and it's beautifully illustrated by a master of art, Clint Langley. And if you know, in the
they look gorgeous. The illustrations we've seen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Clint's an amazing guy. I mean, he's obsessed with Stokerverse, but he's known for Warhammer 40k. He's known for 2000 AD. He's known for a lot of stuff, right? And fuck, he disturbs me at times. I mean, I write in a very strange way, because I write something and I forget about it, and I think that's how I keep my sanity. I told Clive Barker this. I was working with Clive on something this year, and I said, look, how I fucking keep my sanity is essentially I write this stuff and I go upstairs and I forget about it. And then about a year later, if it gets published, then I'm going, shit, I can't remember anything about this.
When did I
But-
write this?
Because I've written God knows how much stuff then, between there and there. But then, Clint takes it a stage further. So we were in an interview for I think it was Forbidden Planet we did the interview with or something. And Clint's like casually, it was Saturday morning for me. Clint's like chatting away about it and chatting about the artwork. And he said, yeah, my girlfriend was really disturbed because I started painting all this stuff on my walls. Like I've painted this really sexy spider on my wall. And it's, and I can't stop painting the stuff that Chris writes. I can't stop. And I'm like, going, Christ's sake, stop. I can't help this.
Warhammer will do that to a person, I think, sometimes.
Well, I don't know what it was, what the hell I was writing, but he was he's on the walls, he's painting this stuff. And whenever he told me, and I hope nobody takes offense when I say this, but when he painted the spider on the bedroom wall, I went, Jesus, that would be a tough wank. But he showed me it. I've got a picture of it. I'll send it to you, and it's beautiful. Don't get me wrong. Well, I wouldn't want that on my bloody wall, But he crafts it. He's crafted this amazing world, and he did this with the Stokerverse RPG because I think we've got 7 RPG books out now, 7, and the work's incredible. And so I'm. It's lovely to know that, well, in some parts, it's lovely to know that my work's kind of influenced something like that. I'm not necessarily sure in that way, but and you can tell I don't take things too seriously, so I enjoy what I do. But yeah, Shadows of the Stokerverse. It's. I don't do trigger warnings, but it's definitely not for people who. It's very violent. It's graphically violent. I mean, the Stokerverse is mostly graphically violent. It's like a gothic Hellraiser. Essentially, it's that. I'm very proud of that one. It's going to be on sale, I think, next month and across the UK and US and Kickstarter backers. I think that's already starting to go out to them. We had to delay it going out to Kickstarter backers because we couldn't stop Clint from doing more work. It was originally supposed to be 100 pages, and then we ended up. He sent us another another 100 pages of art, and we had to cut that down, and we had to get that into the bloody book. And I think it's now like 160 pages of stuff. You can't stop him. And there's another series. I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but there's another series of Stokerverse RPGs coming out. Clint's done, and he's done 150 pages of art for this bloody thing. And Clint and I are supposed to be working on something else, and he's not. He keeps, and I don't know how to stop the man.
That's giving me like ADHD lock in. Like I must continue to draw.
Well, I think Clint's stuff. He loves and if you buy the book, The Art of Clint Langley, which is a Warhammer centric book. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, it's extremely detailed work. I mean, Clint can do something like his Stokerverse work is detailed and then there's abstract. Because what I said to him was, I'm not somebody that wants to tell the audience what something looks like or what something is. I like ambiguity because I like to craft the thing with the audience, right? So I get them to do things in abstract, so then your brain kind of fills in the details. I give the shape, but not necessarily the texture or the contours, which is a nice, because comic books you have to give the shapes and the contours and everything. But what's nice about a novel like that is that I can craft some of how how people see it from the reading, but Clint is given the other visual aids. But anyway, that's Shadows of the Stokerverse. The video game Dark Reign is out for a Christmas release. I was told it will be like late November. We've got the new cover, the cover for the game. I've been given it, and various media outlets have it, so I can't actually release it yet on Facebook. I was planning to do that today, and then I was told no, various media outlets have that. So it's a Metroidvania game. It's a fun pixel art game. It was created by Spacebot Interactive, getting published by Incubate, and it was and the reason why it's a retro game is because I used to work in the retro. I worked in the games industry for 7 years. and I used to code. I coded in assembly language, so I used to I worked for a place called Antstream Arcade, so we would take legal ROMs, like Atari would give us legal ROMs, Midway would give us ROMs of Mortal Kombat, stuff like that. It was an online arcade service, and I would go into those ROMs and I would extend the games out have various challenges like Double Dragon. You could only use kicks, and how many enemies could you defeat, so I was coding all this stuff. So I have a great passion for retro gaming, and I love Castlevania. I love Castlevania Symphony of the Night and all that stuff. So what happened was I thought, well, we'll do this, and it kind of pushes. So you play through the first level, which is the prologue level, as Jonathan Harker and how he escapes the castle, and that's kind of very authentic to what Bram wanted, and Decker helped me craft that, and you get to that was amazing to do. And then I project it forward into World War One, and whereas you guys have the Holmwood Institute, I've got the Van Helsing Institute, and so somebody out there has to create the Harker Institute now and the Quincy Morris Institute, right? And they probably have, right? Because it's
I think,
but
Dracula 2020 did it. So
has the
Dracula
Jonathan Harker Institute, yeah. So
yeah, right. So it's but so that. Yeah, so this Van Helsing Institute, it's investigating supernatural. It's like Torchwood, right? And you meet all sorts of characters. I try not to spoil it, but you can choose between different characters. I'm very keen that in horror there's strong female characters, because I'm not actually a horror fan, and I've said this a couple of times to people. I don't like horror films mostly. I don't like horror films because a lot of them are exploitation films. And I do write a lot of gruesome things, don't get me wrong, but they're in a particular context. And I don't glorify evil in any way, shape, or form. I think evil's evil. Whether it's homophobia, racism, violence towards women, violence towards animals, evil's evil. And in the Stokerverse, I have a Jack the Ripper who is a painter, and his first real vicious act is that he mutilates a dog and arranges the dog's organs like a Botticelli painting and walks away because he's a psychopath. This is what he does. He's evil. There's no redeeming characteristics about that person. There's nothing there that I don't like to romanticize a serial killer. I don't find that necessary. So I'm not a big fan of horror films that prey on women or the vulnerable or any of that sort of stuff. I don't like that. So I'm very keen on any horror that I write that's kind of inverted a lot. So in the game, I'm getting back to the game now. So in the game, sorry, the Irish in me just go.
No worries.
But in the game, you'll get to play as very strong female characters, and that's not saying that your female character is wearing leather and carrying a whip or a pistol or whatever, because again, that's a trope I don't like. I've actually written a story called Mina Harker, Occult Investigator, and it's Mina Harker in her 50s, and she's not leather. She's not, she's a female hero and a heroine in many different ways. So anyway, you get to do all this in the game, and there's a slight Lovecraftian nature in it. And yeah, I mean, look, the start of the game is quite true to Bram's vision, and as games do, because they're video games, they branch out. It's got to branch out. There's certain touchstones that we have. You'll get to meet Dracula. You'll get to meet Carmilla, the Stoker versus Carmilla. All sorts of things in there. So those are the two upcoming projects, and then we've got another Stokerverse comic coming out next year.
Amazing, so much stuff. I was gonna say, I have a question about the video game, because I would love to play it, but I do not own a Game Boy Color. So I was wondering if you were thinking of releasing it on any other platform.
Oh yeah, it's coming out. Yeah, it's coming out in like Steam and stuff.
Oh, nice.
You can actually, yeah. what you can do actually with it is on day one release, if you've got a PC and you download it, you can just play it on your PC.
Nice. Okay.
Right. So if you buy it from the store, but it's going to be released on Steam and released it. And I think when it's released on Steam and the other platforms, it'll be all tailored to those platforms.
Oh, fantastic. We've been playing some Dracula games on this stream before, so we might pick that up.
Do you know why I did this? Here's the honest truth. Now, come out, Retro Gamer did a review of the demo, so you can go to the site now. You can download the demo and play it on your PC, and I think it lets you play through about a quarter of the first level. So you get the revolver pistol and you get all sorts of things, and you go through Dracula's castle. But why I did this was whenever I was younger, I spent £60 on Bram Stoker's Dracula, the video game, and absolutely fucking hated it. I think it's actually one of the worst vampire horror games I've ever fucking played.
I didn't even realise there was a game for...
There's fucking shitloads of them, and there's none of them any good. And you can get it on the Super Nintendo, you can get it on the Mega Drive, you can get it on the Game Gear, you can get it on the Game Boy, you can get it on the fucking Mega CD. There was a PC version which was like a first-person shoot 'em up. Yeah, yeah. The Mega CD version was like famous because you got to play as Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker, and you did like little punches like this. The Super Nintendo, the first villain, the first boss was Dracula, and Dracula was basically the size of the screen, and your Jonathan Harker was like this. And I swore revenge. I was like Van Helsing in real life. This is my revenge. No.
I found it. Oh no.
Yeah, don't fucking play it, man. Stay away from it.
Quite recently, we played a point and click Dracula game. I think there's 3 of them.
Yeah, there's 4 of them. There's the Resurrection, I think's the last one.
Yes,
yeah.
That's the one, and
you play Alexander Morris. Yeah, it was. Oh, it was one of those like. Oh, I can't remember the term for it now. George might remember. It's when it's like actors doing the cutscenes.
Oh no, that's a completely different one.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about though. I know you're talking about FMV. Yeah, I mean this stuff is good. It's some of them are good fun. I need walkthroughs now. I've got to that age where I need walkthroughs for these bloody things.
Yeah.
But there's so many good like there's a lot of very good vampire games out there. I mean, I played Vampire with the Y and the R, and it's damn good. It's a good storyline. You know, it's actually hard to be good in that game because you get more points you get more of your ability points for beneath.
Yeah, for eating people. Yeah.
You know, and the Castlevania stuff is again, it's my favorite. I love Castlevania, and that really influenced Dark Green. It was that whole thing of, you know, what do I enjoy? What would and again, it's that whole thing too of bringing something out that's affordable for people, trying to give as much value. I mean, the other game that came out this year is the card game. It's a bit glossy, but the card game, which is pretty cool, and you know, it was a reasonably priced game, and people are having fun with that. And I'm trying to make sure that I mean, I don't have complete control over these things, but I try and make sure everything's reasonably priced and people have fun. But yeah, that like Retro Gamer did the whole they did a spread on it, and the lovely thing they put on it was Dracula done right. And I burst into tears when I read that, and I mean it does it does affect me a lot. It's that whole thing of I'm certainly not saying that the Stokerverse is the only Dracula thing, but you know, there's a lot of work goes into all of this shit, and whenever guys are reviewing it and they're playing it and they say it's fun, that's really important to me. You know, and like there's other, like we had a Dracula mobile game that came out last year, and it was the romantic Dracula stuff, and it was that was actually quite difficult for me. This is what I learned as a creator. I mean, listen, the best thing I ever did was become a creator of my own stuff, because it was the most transformative experience. I've become a businessman. I've become, God, I cringe at that. Anti-capitalist businessman. Is there such a thing? But I've learned something that when you pass your franchise over to other companies, you've got to learn to let go.
Yeah.
It's no longer your thing. You're giving them a sandbox to play in. And the company did a hell of a job of it. I mean, my wife couldn't get off the bloody game. Our agent's wife, a lovely Iranian lady, she was completely addicted to this thing. And I was playing, I couldn't understand what was going on. I was watching, I'd go to the bar with my wife. I'd get no fucking talk out of her at all. I just sit there and a drink. And yeah, that's what she was like. And I'm going, is it good? And she said, I shouldn't like this. I can't stop playing it. She's building it. And it was one of those like Bejeweled type games, sort of like that. And then you built up Dracula's castle. And there was this story, basically, Mina ran away. So Mina was a maid in this game. And she runs away. She runs away from, the place she was a maid from, and then runs into Dracula's castle. And says, "Oh my dear, so I shouldn't make fun of this because it's still on sale." But it's not my vision of the Stokerverse. But I tell you now, that became incredibly popular. I think it was one of the most popular things, and it hit the audience because the guys knew what they were doing with it, and it opened my eyes to yeah, I created this thing, but there are people who can take it and turn it into something for other people in a way that I can't. And that was nice. That was nice to see. So that taught me something. That actually taught me something about. And then with the other franchises now, like Dark Legacies, it's becoming the same sort of thing. It's similar. It's having to pass something on so that it becomes greater than what you can do from just writing a book or whatever.
Very cool.
I suppose it's the bittersweetness of having something that is a franchise. Is you have to give away a part of it to keep a part of it.
Yeah, I don't. This is why I don't keep any of my stuff in the house. Nothing. It all gets given away. There's a reason for that. I'm terrified of the ego. I think if you're a creative and you develop an ego, you're fucked. You will end up believing your own press and or the press about you, and that's really dangerous. And the second reason is I don't want to look in my bookshelf and smile with great satisfaction and say I did all that, and then forget about what I need to do tomorrow or what I need to do to keep moving forward. So I remove everything. Like I've got a couple of things, like the more unusual things, like the beer stuff and like the Terminator busts and things that were gifted to me, and the Dracula dice from the RPG and things. But nothing else really. Like none of I don't have any of the comics. I don't have anything. No, none of the books. Nothing. And I just give it all away, and it means that I've got a clean slate. So whenever I'm going to write something else, I don't have the baggage of what happened before. This is the new thing. This is going out. This is what it is.
That's cool. Yeah, that's very cool. I'm trying to think, based on our questions, what we have left to ask you, because we've covered quite a lot of ground in the last almost hour. Let's try to think. I think the one thing I wanted to ask you about, because whilst looking into the Stokerverse stuff, I noticed you did the voices of Dracula, which is the Audible project. What was that like? Because obviously that relates more to what our medium is, actually writing audio drama. So what was that?
That was the most surreal experience. I got up one night on a Tuesday. So Virgin's Embrace hadn't been released yet. It came out in May 20. When the hell did that come out? 2022. And I got up on a Tuesday, February night around 1 o'clock in the morning and decided I was going to write an audio drama. I'd never written an audio drama before in my life. And I started writing these scripts, and I finished by 5 o'clock in the morning. I finished the whole damn thing. And I saw it all. I heard it all in the head, everything. And I mean, what Voices of Dracula is about is getting into the heads of the characters. I think this is before, Decker started telling me stuff about, the history of Dracula and the hidden stuff and all. I didn't know any of this stuff yet because the Stoker family hadn't said, go ahead and do Dracula. It was, at the time, it was the Stokerverse came about really after Voices of Dracula. It was at that time, it was a one-shot deal. We'll do a comic with you. We'll see how it goes. And anyway, I was writing this stuff and I knew who I wanted because being a Doctor Who fan, I knew who I wanted for this. So I started sending I sent the script to Jessica Martin for a start because I wanted her to be Mina. And she read it. She rang me and she said, Jesus, this is incredible. She said, send me the other things so I can see them. And I sent me, oh yes, you must send Colin Becker this. You must send, and I did. And, and Colin has since told me he recorded lots of lovely videos to promo stuff. And Colin said to me he's always wanted to be Van Helsing. And he had met Decker at some convention, some sci-fi weekend convention. And he was like trying to butter Decker up to see if there was anything. And this was years before Decker kind of met me. So I didn't know any of this shit. So he did a Terry Malloy. I was perfect as Renfield because, again, it's the Davros thing. Like it's the super sanity of Davros. And I could hear that slightly different intonation, but that sort of rap thing. And, I did... I worked Walt Whitman into Renfield's. So Walt Whitman's Body Electric. I worked that in because obviously the relationship that Bram had with Walt Whitman was important, and I wanted to put that in. So all of this was coming out of me. And then who was the next person? Then it was Dracula was interesting. So I always, when I was a kid, I played Legacy of Kain, the video game series, and David Templeman was Kain. So I liked that voice. I always thought that was a great Dracula voice. And I thought, well, Jesus, I'm not going to get him. I mean, he's a Hollywood actor, But anyway, what I did was, Jessica said, send it to him. So I sent it to him. And I got a phone call at 10 o'clock in the morning, my time. And he from Skype. So he asked for my Skype. I gave him my Skype. And he's driving down the motorway in LA. And he starts talking to me and he pulls over and he says, how old are you? I told him. He said, I would have expected an older person from the script that you've given me. He said, I'll tell you what happened. He said, this morning I printed out the script and I was reading it and I got my wife and my kid to read it. And they said, you have to do this. And he said, do you know who my wife is? And I said, no. Rosalind Chow. She was Chief O'Brien's wife in Star Trek. And she said she wants a part in it. But anyway, I've been told I have to do this. You can't afford me. So I'm just going to do it for free. We're friends now. So I'm going to do this for free. I said, I'll sign a waiver. I don't care. And we get into this conversation. He was pulled over at the side of the road. He'd been sent out for bagels. And I don't think this poor wife ever got bagels that day at all. And we're chatting about fish and chips and about how shit LA is because it's all health food and you can't get a proper pint and all this stuff. And in between all that, then we're talking about Dracula and we're talking about Legacy of Kain and we're talking about... And he said, well, I'm going to get you to vocally direct me so that you get director's credits on IMDb and you do that. And he said, I'm going to teach you how to vocally direct actors. And, that was great. That was a great experience. And then Claudia, this was how my relationship with Claudia got formed, was because I wrote a completely new character for Claudia as a sort of an intro to Dracula. Like why she's part of a thief. She's a part of a thief guild, Victorian thief guild, and she's asked to go and retrieve something in Carfax Abbey, and Dracula gets her. She's trying to retrieve a ring in Carfax Abbey, and the ring's actually links to the Jewel of Seven Stars, which is the ring that the sorceress Pharaoh Terra wears on her finger. This is actually why Dracula wants Carfax. I just shoehorned that in, And then Dracula manipulates her. He's got control over her. And then when Dracula dies, then there's a codex at the Voices of Dracula. So after Dracula's dead, his influence leaves her. But she knows that the vampire court in England is being controlled by a Lord Ruven, It's obviously it's a throwback to, to the vampire story. And what she does is she goes and she actually seduces him, and he bites her, but she's consumed poison before that. So she watches him die as she dies. And then Claudia was all upset. She says, I like that character. Can you not bring me back? And I said, well, he did bite you, so we could do. But anyway, that was Voices of Dracula. And then what happened was, and I'll be quite honest about this, I didn't know if any of this shit was going to work. I mean, this was before, but when versions of Brace came out and people liked it and it hit the charts, and that was grand. And then whenever Voices of Dracula did the same thing, that was really when the Stokerverse started, and that was whenever it was like, okay, this is going to be a thing now. So that was the very first audio drama I'd ever written, and I think now I've written something like 20 of these things across different.
It gets in your blood, doesn't it, when you start?
Yeah, I mean it's a funny thing. I don't know. When I was writing some of the Davros stuff, with Terry. I'd written stuff and I'd sent it to Terry, and then Terry rang me, and he just said very quietly, he said, you hear him too, don't you? And there is an element of that, I think, when you start writing audios, because you hear it. And at that point, Terry started reading out the bloody stuff as Davros, which was quite unnerving on the phone. But it's that thing that, you almost, as an audio writer, you almost become the actors. Like, you almost hold the actors' voices in your head because you can hear them, because you're writing dialogue and you can't help but hear those voices and how the people are saying those things and what they're. And now I'm a screenwriter for films and stuff. It's the same sort of process because you can see it all. So I write almost. People say, I think you write visually, but it is that. It's like how I teach people how to write is to go away into write your characters and write a brief outline of your story, and then go away into the bedroom and sit and imagine the whole story, and then imagining the story again with you being in the story and listening to whatever is going on, and usually whenever I take a writing class and do that, then people come to me with their character list, and they're all very happy because they've written 10 pages in their characters, and then I take the sheets of characters and I just rip them up in front of them, and then they get very angry. And I said to them, but do you understand? You understand these characters now. You've imagined yourself being in those characters. So you don't need this sheet. So if you wanted to imagine any other story with those characters, could you do it? Yeah, because you've internalized the characters. So you don't need sheets. You don't need any of that shit. It's not inside you. And all you've got to do is write it. And you're unburdening yourself with all the paraphernalia. I mean, Jesus, I know people who have put maps up on their blood, and they have these post-it notes, and they're full fucking, they're just covered with it. They're burdened with all of this stuff. And I try and go back. I don't have any of that. I just sort of sit down and I go, think about it, imagine it, and then write it. And then, writing's easy because you're writing what you see in your head. And it becomes very personal because it's what's in your head and that's going out there. Now, I'm not knocking it. If people have different systems, that's fine. But for me, I have got to have that simplicity. And that's how I teach. So be warned, people who come to me for writing advice. Don't write 10 pages of notes because they'll just get ripped up.
Always good thing to be warned about.
Yeah. Okay. Georgia, do we have any further questions that you'd like to ask at this point? I think we've covered most. I
think we've covered everything. Is there any questions in the chat at all?
There are no questions in the chat. We did have someone saying Dracula is about the power of friendship, which I thought was quite good. And Jonathan, scaling the walls equals hardcore instead of parkour. So parkour.
That's nice. I like that. And the person who said Dracula equals friendship, they've played the mobile game.
I think they meant the power. I think they were referring to that the crew are coming together to fight against Dracula.
Yeah,
not
that's
Dracula
very
equals friendship. But
That's very true.
I
I
like
mean,
that.
you think of the evils in the world at the minute, right? Like transphobia and homophobia and all sorts of things that are going on, right? And it's dreadful. And the world works in all these bloody cycles. I mean, not so long ago, the Irish were hated, and and it's any scapegoat. But we always come back as a civilization, as a society. We always come back stronger because the good people band together, and they do. And it can be rough and it can be hard, and there's lots of different Draculas out there at the minute. I always get into trouble when I talk about this shit, but there are lots of different Draculas out there at the minute, and if you do study the book of Dracula, you'll know exactly. I mean, the interesting thing is in Bram's notes that Dracula was a very political animal. I mean, he wasn't coming to England for a booty call. He was coming to run the British Empire. He was wanting that power. He wanted it. And he sat in a room with aristocrats, and he debated Nietzschean philosophy. And Nietzschean philosophy is the most dangerous form of philosophy, because it states that you don't need any moral imperative. You don't need any morally driven story. So whatever morally driven story you believe in, whether it's mythology or religious text or Transformers or for me it's Doctor Who and Star Trek, Babylon 5, all of that stuff, you remove it all, and then what happens is it's the fight for survival. It's the Übermensch, it's the Overman, they will win, and that's what Dracula is. And if you look at our world today, you'll see that Nietzschean philosophy is prevalent and extremely dangerous. And that's what, for me, that's what Dracula represents. He's a right bastard.
Yeah.
And we always unite against right bastards.
We do. Team, we will be our own crew of light, and we need to fight those right bastards.
I think that is a fantastic place to end the interview on.
Absolutely. Yes, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. What I'll do is, if you want to say goodbye, but what I'll do is I'll also show the events that are coming up as well, and hopefully my microphone will come through. But Chris, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything
Thanks for having me.
Plug before we leave that you want us to?
Well, no, I'm going to plug Holmwood Institute, because I've binged the first 4 episodes now of it, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thank
There's something quite addictive about it. I'm playing Star Wars Old Republic while I'm listening to it, and I haven't played Old Republic in years, but I'm playing that and I'm listening to it, and it's just, again, it's wonderful to see how people take this story that this Irish writer wrote, and like Bram was really depressed about his career at that stage. He was looking at Poe and he was looking at his friend Oscar Wilde, and these guys were having all the success in Gothic literature, and he was like, "Hey guys, I want a piece of this," and he didn't know that Dracula was going to work. And I would love to have said to him, "You have no idea that people are going to take what you've created, and they're going to change it, and it's going to be modified, and it's going to live on, because the core of it reflects an awful lot of stuff." And like today, we didn't go into the queerness of Dracula, and we didn't go into any of that stuff, but that's also a fascinating topic. And there's lots of really good source materials out there about that, and I think it's really important to highlight. And you guys are doing that with the Holmwood Institute, so I am enjoying it a lot.
Thank you so much. It's probably a good time to plug. If you're watching this, we are actually releasing the Kickstarter on the 14th
for season 2.
So please do be notified on the Kickstarter for that. If just in case, I'm just going to quickly put the link in the chat, because that's a very good idea. So I'm just going to quickly dump it in, even though I'm sure everyone who's watching probably already knows, because we've been spamming you for the last 2 weeks. But yes, thank you so much again, Chris. Thank you to everyone watching. Thank you for all the comments and the questions. We had no questions, but no, yeah, anyone agrees, it's still friendship, yes. So I'm just going to quickly show the events for coming up. So hopefully my microphone will still come through. Yes, it does. So just to check, so Kickstarter opens on the 14th. Then we have our Holmwood RPG night. So for those who are not aware, we are very excited about this. So myself, Candice, who plays Magdalena Swift, Basil, who plays Tom, and Benji, our sound designer, are going up against our GM, Dan Tyree, who is also a little cameo in the story. And we're doing the prequel, basically, of the Holmwood Foundation. So the events that take place during the Whitby building collapse. If you'd like to know what happens, because it will become canon, guys, it's going to be canon, please do join us to watch that unfold, because we do not know what's going to happen. We know who the characters are. That's about it. It's up to Dan and to Georgia, who's been writing behind the scenes all the elements. So do join us for that. We then speak to Tal Munir, who made Regarding Dracula, the podcast, on Sunday. And then we've got loads of other things, but we'll just summarise this week because there's a lot going on this week. But thank you so much again for joining us. And yes, have a great rest of your evening, great rest of your weekend. And we'll speak to you soon. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.